An explosion in Saukville sends at least 4 people to the hospital with burns.
It happened inside Johnson Brass. That's a foundry in Saukville. Charles Benson joins us live on the phone. Charles?
I'm standing right outside that plant right now, and there's a lot of activity right here on Mills Road. I just saw a woman running across the sidewalk trying to get to the plant to find out what has happened to her husband. She says, my husband works in there, and I haven't been able to get a hold of him. The only thing we've been able to hear by talking to other people here, we have not been able to talk to firefighters or police, but that 4 people were injured. I'm told that 2 of them were serious. I talked to a man who had arrived on the scene. They said his brother had also been burned on the back of his legs, and he was heading to the hospital to talk to his brother, who appeared to be okay but had burns on his leg. I also was able to get close enough to the plant and talked to another woman who was standing with her husband who also had burns on the back of his leg. She indicated that they were pouring metal, and then there was just an explosion that blew him and others out of the area where they were working inside this foundry. Now, there are a number of ambulances still arriving here on the scene from a variety of departments within the Saukville area. Flight for Life has been in here, setting up at a local park. It looks like a triage center there with a lot of workers over there, and Flight for Life leaving twice here from the scene. Those may be the 2 serious injuries that we've heard about, but still very much an active situation going on here. At last check, this was a 2 alarm. But again, Mike and Carol still trying to figure out what exactly went on inside this plant. Based on their website, there are about 100 employees that work inside this foundry. This is a 4th-generation family that has been running this company for more than 100 years. So a lot of people in this town of Saukville very familiar with this plant and very concerned at this moment as to what has happened to the folks who work inside. Mike and Carol?
And Charles, we'll just add some additional details while you're there on the phone. We are hearing from our people in the newsroom that 2 people seriously burned, being airlifted presumably to Columbia St. Mary's on Milwaukee's east side. Also a couple of other injuries being taken to the new Aurora Hospital there in Saukville as well, or rather Grafton. And in addition to that, there are a handful of other walking wounded as they were described to us.
Yes, and Charles, we know that this family has been in the area for generations. So with only about 100 workers, most of the people basically know each other in that area. It is a small town.
It is a small town, and this plant has been here since 1960, so people are very familiar with it. I talked to a man who lives across the street. I believe he might have been on one of our earlier broadcasts. He could feel the vibrations, he said, from across the street from the plant when this explosion occurred. As I look onto the plant, I'm standing right on Mill Road looking at the front of the plant. I don't see any damage or any indication of an explosion, but I do see a lot of emergency vehicles, a lot of people coming to the scene, family members trying to find out what has happened to someone who has worked inside. The only sort of walking wounded that I saw was one man. His pants looked like they had been ripped, and he had some burns on the back of his leg. I talked to his wife, and she was the one who indicated that they were pouring metal, and that's when it exploded. That's the only indication we've been able to get in terms of anyone who was close to what had happened inside the plant. As you can imagine, emergency vehicles, firefighters, they're all very, very busy right now. Downtown Saukville is also a mess as people are trying to get through the downtown area because emergency vehicles have pretty much taken over the downtown area. I've seen trucks and fire crews coming from the surrounding areas, Cedarburg, Fort Washington, Thiensville, you name it. They're all rolling in right here. There's also a park that's about 2 blocks away from the front entrance of the plant. That's where they have set up for Flight for Life. I saw 2 helicopters go in, and I've seen 2 leave at this point. So waiting to find out more from fire officials and exactly the total amount that are injured, but we do know 2 appear to be seriously burned. Mike and Carol?
All right, thanks. Charles Benson joining us live. That would be Grady Park, which is just a block or 2 west of the foundry itself. I think we may have a witness on the phone with us now. Jared Bruttig is joining us on the phone. Jared, are you with us?
Yes.
And tell us what you saw or heard this afternoon.
I was nearby. I live about 2-3 minutes away from the plant itself. Heard numerous sirens and went to look outside and saw numerous different fire officials and fire departments responding. As Charles said, Cedarburg, Thiensville, Mequon, Grafton, Fort Washington, the Sheriff's Department, all of the various emergency crews responding. Worked my way over there. Nearby, Grady Park is the park where the Fight for Life helicopters came. And when I was there, I saw both of them land and one person in a stretcher wrapped up from head to toe in a yellow tarp, more or less, being pushed over to the helicopter. I did not see if they put anyone on the second one, but almost immediately after that took off and going to the nearby hospitals. But definitely a lot of commotion. I did not see any fire, anything like that. It appears that might be under control at this time, but definitely a chaotic scene going on right now.
And Jared, you live close to that area, and you mentioned that you've seen a lot of chaos, but have you heard of any other incidents or fire situations at this plant before that you are aware of?
I've never heard of anything for it, and initially seeing this, it was a little concerning because Grady Park is near the plant, but the elementary school, the local elementary school, is also near the plant. And it's fortunate that obviously this happened a little later because the elementary school is not even probably 100 feet away from this plant. So they're stationed all over. I haven't heard of anything previously occurring at this plant.
And that is very disconcerting if you think about it. But from what all we know, the plant was evacuated, but everything has been contained inside the Johnson foundry. Is that what you're hearing as well?
That is what I'm hearing as well, yes, and that's what it looks like from the outside of the perimeter.
Well, Jared, we certainly appreciate your sharing the information that you witnessed there just outside the plant this afternoon in Saukville. We appreciate the call.
Thank you, Jared.
Right now, we want to go to a live picture from Columbia St. Mary's. We have a camera set up there, and this is a live picture. We are waiting for the arrival of the Flight for Life helicopters. We anticipate that that is where typically serious burn victims are taken whenever there is a case of this type. There's a helipad up there on the roof, and if you look closely, you can see it almost looks like a little bit of a flag up there, but that's actually a windsock, so the chopper knows what kind of wind it's going to be dealing with when it sets down on the roof there, presumably coming up in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, that at least 2 people were transported to St. Mary's with serious injuries. So we don't know the extent much more than that, but hopefully those individuals will be able to be okay.
Our Jermont Terry's been doing a little bit of research on the background, and anytime you have an industrial plant, it's not terribly unusual for there to have been incidents of one sort or another, and he learned that Johnson Brass was cited for violations by OSHA, 3 years ago?
Yes, and that was fines for 3 serious violations at that time in 2011. An OSHA inspection showed some hazardous energy that was not contained properly and that could likely harm employees. Now, Johnson Brass has paid nearly $5,000 in fines for those violations, but really has not had any other problems, according to OSHA, before today's explosions.
Right now we want to go out to our picture of Flight for Life again. This is from Columbia St. Mary's on the east side, and we've got a live picture coming in, and this is, we believe, the first of the Flight for Life choppers to arrive. Witnesses have indicated that there were 2 dispatched to Grady Park there west of the foundry, and we believe that both of those helicopters are conveying the most seriously injured in this explosion. This would be Flight for Life Chopper 1, just setting down now as it approaches Columbia St. Mary's on Milwaukee's east side.
Yeah, you can imagine this is a very difficult situation because anytime you're dealing with hot metal and an explosion occurs, then you know that those injuries could be possibly life-threatening. We're hoping that will not be the case. We do know some of the injured were able to walk away. We don't even know if they were about 3 or 4 or a handful were injured, but they did not go to the hospital because their injuries were not serious enough. But we also know that at least 1 patient is at the hospital in Aurora, that is in Grafton, and these 2 patients, this is Columbia St. Mary's and Milwaukee, we believe are in this helicopter right now.
Yeah, the Columbia St. Mary's is the burn center really for all of southeastern Wisconsin, and typically you have automobile accidents or other serious types of injuries, and they typically go to Freighted, but when it comes to burn treatments, Columbia St. Mary's really is the gold standard, and that's where all of the burn victims, at least the critical burn victims, go. So we would expect anytime you're dealing with molten metal and some type of an explosion, if there's anybody in the immediate vicinity, they certainly are at risk for serious, critical, and perhaps even life-threatening injuries.
We have several reporters on the scene, and we are continuing to monitor the story. So as soon as we get additional information or we do find it, we will bring that to you. And right now we're going to continue to look at this live picture.
Yeah, Jared was describing one of the victims wrapped head to toe in a yellow or protective blanket of some sort, and that is precisely what we are seeing now. The first of the patients there arriving and being transported from the helipad itself to the presumably the emergency room, and I'm sure it's a specialized burn center treatment room there as well.
Yeah, St. Mary's known all over the world really for its quality care when it comes to burn patients and patients who have been injured. So this is the place to go for any serious injuries or anybody who has suffered extensive burns.
And it's going to be interesting to see if they are able to put a second chopper down on that helipad side by side, or if the first one will have to lift off to make room for the incoming, if indeed there is a second one, as we are expecting, that is heading into St. Mary's with a second patient. Just kind of watching this here. Again, Charles Benson has been on the scene and then there goes the first one up, so we may be seeing the second one come in here very shortly. Charles Benson again reporting on the scene that it was really almost a chaotic scene a little bit with the fire and emergency crews are already there, but now you've got families of employees who are there at the hospital trying to find out how their relatives are doing.
Yeah, they have no idea how. We heard the one wife said her husband worked at the plant and had no idea how he had fared in this explosion. Now, one of the problems, of course, when you're talking about burn situations, getting the patients to treatment quickly, you have to protect the skin and getting them out so that they can save or salvage whatever they can in terms of the injury. So a very precarious situation happening in Saukville. A lot of rescue personnel on the scene, on the ground, and also in the air trying to make sure and stabilize this scene.
All right, we are going to take a very quick break here as we continue to monitor developments. And in fact, can you help me folks in the control room? Is this a second chopper coming in, or is this the first one that's just taken off again? We're kind of watching the monitors up above here trying to keep track of what's going on. All right.